And they think that Mary was immaculately conceived. That means that her mother, Anne, the mother of Mary, which isn't in the Bible, but it's in tradition, when she had Mary, she had a sinless daughter who had a sinless child, Jesus.
So here I'm going to recommend a book that you read. If you're a Protestant, I do want you to read this book, because what this book does is it goes through the Jewish roots of Mary, and it's quite literally called Jesus and the Jewish Roots of Mary, where it talks about the Immaculate Conception, exclusively, I don't want to say exclusively, but primarily from how Mary was immaculately conceived from the scriptures. A lot of it has to do with Mary being the new Eve, the new Ark of the Covenant, and why that typology of Mary being the new Eve and the new Ark of the Covenant, by default, if we are to read the Bible typologically, Mary, if she is the new Eve, or if she is the new Ark of the Covenant, which all of the church fathers, agree upon when they read the New Testament, they very quickly saw this connection. Right? If that assertion is correct, then Mary has to be greater than Eve. Mary has to be greater than the Ark of the Covenant, right? And the Ark of the Covenant in the Old Testament was so pure and holy and clean that somebody tried touching it. I think it was like Uzzah or something like that. He tried touching it and he died, right? So how much more clean and holy and pure is Mary, who bears God himself? How much more holy is she, that she can bear the flesh of the Word, right? How much more sinless is Mary than Eve, if she, like Jesus, is the new Adam? She, like Eve, if she is the new Eve the way Jesus is the new Adam, right? If Mary is greater than Eve, she has to be created the way Eve was created, free from the stain of original sin, such that she can undo the effects of the fall. And I'm going to give a quick biblical explanation for the connection between Mary and the Ark of the Covenant, which you will find in the Gospel of Luke. In the Old Testament, David arose and went into the Judean hill country to retrieve the Ark of the Covenant in 2 Samuel 6:2. In the Gospel of Luke, Mary arose and went to the Judean hill country to visit Elizabeth in Luke 1:39. In 2 Samuel 6:14, dressed in linen, David danced before the ark. In Luke 1:41 and Luke 1:5 and 1:13, John the Baptist of priestly lineage leapt in the womb in the presence of Mary. In 2 Samuel 6:9, David asked, "How can the ark of the Lord come to me?" And Elizabeth asked, "Why is it granted to me that the mother of my Lord should come to me?" Luke 1:43. 2 Samuel 6:15, David brought up the ark of the Lord with shouting. In Luke 1:42, Elizabeth exclaimed with a loud cry in the presence of Mary. 2 Samuel 6:11, the ark remained in the house of Obed-Edom for 3 months. In Luke 1:56, Mary remained in the house of Elizabeth for 3 months. In the house of Obed-Edom, the house of Obed-Edom was blessed by the presence of the ark in 2 Samuel 6:11, and Elizabeth uses the word blessed 3 times at the arrival of Mary in Luke 1:42 and 45. So why is that important? Well, this is important because this is the kind of thing that the, early church fathers and early church theologians were very, very quick to make the connection to, that led them to the conclusion that Mary was the new Ark of the Covenant and that Mary was the new Eve. And of course, the stuff with the new Eve, requires a lot of, typological threads that I don't want to take the time to, sew in this video, because it would just be too long. This pastor, he's saying things that, kind of show a lack of knowledge and a lack of nuance when it comes to trying to understand, the logical and metaphysical steps that the early church worked really hard to tie together to bring the Bible to life. And he's just kind of trashing on that, without giving any kind of reverence or respect to all the theologians that went through the hard work of making the typological connections that brought, the whole church to the conclusions that, the Eastern Orthodox and the Catholic Church and all the apostolic churches, come to with respects to Mary.
Because they elevate tradition over Scripture. You can read that. Fourthly,
that is not true. We don't elevate tradition over Scripture, right? It's simply that tradition, the magisterium, and Scriptures are the three pillars of faith that make the Christian faith come to life, that make it both practical, true, useful, but also inspiring, for the life of the Christian every day. So no, that's just not true. That one's just an outright lie. I don't know where he's getting that from. Even, in the catechism, right? Tradition and magisterial teaching cannot contradict Scripture, faith, or morals, right? Even within the Protestant framework, right? The church, right? The tradition and the magisterium of the church has to submit to Scripture. Right there, he's just saying something that isn't true. He's not quoting anything from the catechism. He's not bringing up any documents. He's just quickly listing things that he feels like are wrong, but not giving any actual evidence.
Their veneration, worship of images. They ascribe to images, to saints, to all of the what I call the holy hardware that they have in those churches. They ascribe to them the attributes of God, the omniscience, the omnipresence, and the power of God to come to the aid and omnipotently help them. So
I kind of see where you're saying there. This is probably the closest to, a somewhat credible argument that he has. Because when I was converting from Protestant to Catholic, this was one of the struggles that I had, which was, what's up with the images, right? Even in the Ten Commandments, right? You shall not have any graven images of, heaven above or, of the earth below. Why is it that, throughout history, the Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox churches, they have iconography and artwork, depicting God himself, or depicting, heavenly places, and, depicting, the earth down below. To answer that question, there's a lot of context that needs to be given to that commandment of thou shalt not make any graven images. The first thing is that the reason images in the Old Testament weren't to be made of heavenly places is because in the historical context of the people in that, era, in that historical period, images were always exclusively the means by which you worship, right? The image itself was to be worshipped. But as people grew and as people were able to gain a more nuanced and wise understanding of the purpose of images and the purpose of, what art is supposed to do, we were able to better discern that, oh, it's not the image that's being worshipped, right? It's what is it that we're holding a reverence to? It's what allows us to connect with God. Yes, there's a certain presence, there's a certain beauty and reverence that art, I guess, I don't know where you're saying where we're attributing aspects of images to, or we're attributing, aspects of God to images. I'm not quite sure what he's getting at. Like the image behind me here, oh my goodness, I can't point. The image right there, right, where I have Christ on the crucifix and the 12 apostles, and, I have Jesus and Mary, behind me here. I'm not looking at that and being like, oh, that's God. That's that. I'm not convinced that those images are Jesus and Mary. So, I'm not, it's just his argument, it kind of makes sense because he's drawing on what the second commandment is, but it's an understanding of that commandment without its historical and cultural context. And so with that, again, that's probably his most credible and most based argument. But again, it's not that images themselves are the bad thing. It's the context under which the Jews and the Israelites were bound to treat images as. And then again, even within the context of the Ten Commandments, God says to the Israelites, don't make any images of heavenly places. And then quite literally, In that same book, God commands the people and Moses to build the Ark of the Covenant with 2 angels on the Ark of the Covenant, which are images of things in heavenly places. So again, like, it's obvious that that's not what the bad thing is. It's not the images themselves. It's the behavior of worshiping the actual image itself. So there, that would be my main response to that.